And hello, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the collective. I was on the wrong tab for a second. It took me a bit to get that intro up,
Yes, you were.
but I really appreciate y'all joining us. It's going to be a great show. We have some very, very interesting topics to talk about. And I'm actually going to send it over to Travis so he
Oh,
can
no.
tell us about our topic because it
I
was
like
his
it.
idea that he brought it up.
Oh,
So,
man.
Travis,
I got so
what
many
do you got
different
for
ideas. I think we're talking about artificial intelligence on this one. Am I correct on
Boom.
that?
AI.
AI.
Okay, cool. I dig it.
So, what's your first thought? What's your first question about AI for Mr. Sean Taylor?
Oh, my God. There's so many. Shaun, when you and I were at your place, we sat down, we did that podcast. You mentioned a couple things, some on mic, some off mic, but it led me to believe that you've been studying AI pretty deeply and you've had your finger in the technology world more than just in a passive way. And I was reviewing some material on AI because it's all over my social feed right now.
Yeah, it's really being a thing now.
Right. Everyone's talking about Chat GPT and they're talking about the AI art and AI conversation models, the ethics of AI. How do we prepare ourselves for the future? Like they're saying, how do we prepare our kids? Well, how do we prepare ourselves? And there's so many different levels of that. And there is, if we wanted to, maybe later on, depending on time, look at it. There's also, I think it was Musk who came up and said the probability of people living in an artificial intelligence simulation exceeds the probability that they don't. And then other people have looked at that, confirmed it based on the prospect. I think it was on the trilemma of that they're basing it on, and one bright individual put it into a dilemma and says, well, essentially the odds of that are 50-50, which is still pretty damn high for people living in a simulation.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So, what are your thoughts, Sean? You're up.
Man, this is stuff that I love talking about, and I just don't talk to anyone about it. So, like, I finally get to talk about it, except in my own head, of course. I talk to my own head. But I don't really talk to people about this kind of stuff. And it's not because it's not fascinating to other people. I think it's just, it's a really big subject, and not a lot of people are really well read on it. I mean, most people are as deeply read as the clickbait that they'll see in their social media feed. The robots are coming to get us, or will the robots ever show up, or whatever, some sort of clickbaity stuff. But I've been looking at this for a long time now. Before I say anything more on all of this technology and all of my thoughts on it, I'm just going to hit you with it's not a bizarre concept. I think it's a super cool concept. It's just that, um, it's just that it's not a big deal, is what I'll say. But the collective, all right? The collective operates in this world that we're in right now, of course. I mean, we're all in the real world, right? I mean, we couldn't be in a simulation. So the collective, we're all in the collective right now. We're doing the collective things. But before the collective became a twinkle in anyone's eye, I'd been thinking about, this whole GPT 3.0, 3.5, and 4.0 that has already shown up and is about to show up in the version of 4.0. These are big things that are happening right now in our world that not a lot of people are paying attention to, other than the people that are in that industry. And so, there's some not casual observers, but there's some important observers who have made note of it around the world. And of course, guys like Elon Musk will use as an example. When someone like Elon says, the robots are coming to get us, or he says the robots will never show up, a large chunk of the population thinks if that's what Elon says, that's what's going to happen. And so these casual observations by important people out there are enough to trigger some thought. And so I've been watching it unfold or unpackage itself as the years go by, as the months go by. Now it's kind of as the weeks go by, as this pace picks up on this AI technology. I've seen it go from nothing to now it's kind of becoming a bit of a big deal.
Mhm.
But when it wasn't a big deal, I was already thinking about it. And one of the reasons that I wanted to start the collective, I can't believe I'm going to say this.
Do it.
Oh my goodness. Is because I was thinking about GPT 3.0 and how it becomes intelligent. And so I'm not going to get deeply into how it all works, but if you look at GPT 3.0, 3.5, and 4.0, basically what they're doing is parsing or raiding the internet, consuming, absorbing everything that's out there in the sense of news feeds, social media, et cetera, art, what have you. It's just consuming everything in order to better understand, in order to learn through deep learning models, through all kinds of learning models, through new models that are being created as we speak to learn how to do it more effectively, more efficiently, more powerfully, more dot, dot, dot. So this is what entered into my head quite some time ago. If if our future is going to be defined or is going to be in some way refined by artificial intelligence as we move towards, we'll call it singularity in maybe 2045, 2050, whatever. From now till then, our future is being defined by what is consumed by the robot. And
Mhm.
and if we're putting out negative stuff, man, that's what our future is.
Mhm.
We're literally in real time forming or shaping our future world through the lens of what GPT 4.7 is going to create for us. And so, whatever it consumes, it's a self fulfilling prophecy, man.
Mhm.
So, if we're putting out negative, that's our future. And if we're putting out positive, that's our future. And so, I decided in my own tiny little world, my own tiny little way, I thought, if we could create something called whatever, and now it's called a collective, that does a whole pile of really good things in the real world, pretending that this isn't a simulation for a moment. If it's doing good things in the real world and the artificial world is going to interpret those real world things and create a future positive world for us by having positive things in the real time world right now, I'm okay with that. Even if it's only not even a blip on the radar, at
Mhm.
least it's in my world, my real world, or my simulated world. At least I'm in charge of my own future
Mhm.
through the lens of artificial intelligence, the robots, the simulation, whatever you want to call it. I made a conscious decision to run my game, our game, the simulation game, the game against the AI game, the game where I'm going to shape my future through being conscious of trying to shape my future, understanding it through the mechanisms of the artificial intelligence that is wrapped around us right now. So, I guess what I will say is this: I'm gamifying the game that is wrapped around me right now. And I've chosen to hit the big positive button rather than the big negative button. That's just my opening thoughts.
I think
Cool.
I think you're ahead of the curve on that. There are people who refer to themselves as futurists who sit and study what the future is going to be like and how we adapt and interact with it. When you talk about the possibility of negative bias within an artificial intelligence system, if you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to put what are the cons of artificial intelligence, the number one thing that comes up is the possibility of negative bias being programmed in either intentionally or negatively. And it has a few other negatives in there. So, from my understanding, in the development of the AI, they said, look, it's really important for us to make this learning model learn from content that is human generated, as opposed to they'll put in invisible watermarks on the artificial intelligence work, and so that it's not using that stuff it's created itself and creating that little wormhole repeating cyclical echo chamber of negativity. When so this futurist, John Sinai, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, and he says, for the last 10,000 years or so, we've been an agricultural based civilization. And the path towards prosperity was simple. It was clear. You follow the seasons, you follow the crops, you do what your forefathers did, and you work 16 hours a day, and you produce agriculture, and you have a thriving, successful life. And then the Industrial Revolution came around and threw that entire system on its head. And the physicality of the agricultural system that was in place was no longer valued in the way that it once was. And the value system changed. The value system changed to one of you go to school, you acquire information, you become intellectual, you go into university, you get jobs in the sphere where you can now regurgitate this information and hopefully refine it and build upon that information that you've consumed, and your life fulfillment and what you get paid is alienable to what you have been able to accumulate in your head. So we're going through a similar revolution. We're on the cusp, this fellow says, of the AI revolution, in the same way that the steam engines had basically make physicality obsolete. The artificial intelligence is making the accumulation of knowledge obsolete, when you can go in and have it produce a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis, faster and more accurately based on the totality of all the information that it's able to consume, or legal opinions so much faster. It starts saying, like, what is the role of our lawyers? What is the role of our doctors or these educated people? And he supposes that where we went from physicality to intelligence, IQ-based sort of society, we're now moving from an IQ-based to more a adaptability quotient or creative quotient. And we're looking at the maker market and the creators that are out there that bring their own unique individuality to the sphere, which is exactly what is happening with the collective, which is exactly what you're thinking about, Shaun. How do we create something that's individual and positive? So that's, I think, a very, okay. I'm not, I have another thought on that, which I'm not going to jump into quite yet, but maybe I'll just pass it over to you or to Chance.
Well, because you didn't propose a question or a challenge.
No, I didn't at all.
And that's okay. That's okay, because I've already got one in my head, thoughts from it. So I just want to make sure that anyone out there is thinking whatever I'm going to say next is a response to a question or whatever. It isn't. This is what we do over here. Someone talks, you listen, you think as you're listening, not thinking about what you're going to have for breakfast or what you had for breakfast. You pay attention, you learn, and as I'm learning, other thoughts are coming up. So what I'm going to say next is just coming off your conversation. It's not because I already was thinking it before you started talking. So what's important, or what I got from that sort of breakdown of how things have kind of played out in a sense, and of course I know that was a very high level and very broad sweeping sort of intro into what's happened in a sense. This is what I thought. All the buildup, the majority of what you were talking about, all required hard graft, hard labor. You just had to work like a dog in order to create a stalk of corn or whatever the case is. So a lot of hard labor to get simple outcomes. You get to feed your family that year. I mean, it's not that simple, but in context of something hovering in front of your face and you saying, design the next skyscraper of the day for me. I mean, those are two totally different things. And so the reason that I talk about a hovering disk, create the skyscraper for me, go, and then you sit back and it designs a skyscraper for you. And then you say, now build it, go, and it does it. That's easy for someone who is ill-educated or isn't correctly calibrated to create all kinds of problems for our world. But, go back, 1,000 years ago, someone who is we'll call it forward thinking or creative or on the bleeding edge of whatever, anything that they would do hardly made a blip on the radar because, maybe they designed a new tire for an old tractor. And okay, now the tractor moves a bit smoother. That doesn't move the needle for anyone other than, that individual and a few others that he might sell a new tire to. But you put the kind of technology or the kind of power in front of someone who is a farmer, thinking about maybe designing a new uh, tractor tire, but he's got all of the power of GPT 4.0, and maybe he's got like a 3D printer, and he can look at that GPT 4.0 and say, I need a new tire. I'm not sure what it looks like, what color it is, how thick it is, what it doesn't matter to me, GPT 4.0. I just need a new tire that's better than the one I've got. Go. And now you've got a couple of things going on. You've got some powerful outcomes from people who aren't perhaps uh, aren't educated enough to control what is being created by GPT 4.0 and a 3D printer. So they can't get interactive or involved or shut that grid down if GPT 4.0 starts doing all kinds of crazy with that 3D printer. So that would be the first problem I would see is um, people with power not having the experience or the education or the intellectual capacity to be able to interject in a process that they don't understand in order to make it a safer outcome. And I mean, that's just a tiny little example of scale it up. And now you've got someone who's building the new terrifying weapon that we none of us have ever thought of, or we can't barely comprehend. But GPT 4.0 doesn't have that concern. It's just doing what it's told.
Mm.
And so, what is it doing? It's doing it framed through the lens of what it's consumed over the years. And if those thoughts, we'll call them, are predominantly negative based, what GPT 4.0 is going to kick out of that 3D printer is something that is more negative than positive. And
Mm.
I'm using simple words, simple terms, simple ideas to try to put across a very complex and nuanced conversation that if you're sitting there right now listening to this and thinking, oh, that's dumb. GPT 4.0 would never design a laser blaster that shoots our moon down and destroys our planet. I don't know. It probably wouldn't. What I'm saying is that things can get out of control if things aren't controlled well. And so right now we're at a moment in history where a standard issue farmer in the middle of Nowheresville is about 4 years away from being able to produce things that he thinks are a cool idea,
Mhm.
but may not be cool for the rest of humanity, is my point. So I find that this is quite a interesting time where it's a bit wild, wild westish with technology, but it's with technology that isn't just a six shooter where you get to fire 6 rounds and think, okay, well, that was my big day for the year. Well, now there's going to be some pretty big days every day, and we don't even know what they're going to look like. So, and that's just in the near term. That's like it's happening now, but I
Mhm.
mean, it's going to happen to scale in the near term. Oh, I mean, that doesn't even come close to touching the subject of what things are going to look 10 years from now. So I just find that this is a very interesting time where there's not a lot of conversation ripping around the internet about how to thoughtfully apply the mega powerful technology that is just about to drop in our laps.
So when I look at this, I can see the I have a difficult time thinking that we have much unique thought, many unique ideas, really. Things that we come up with now, which are just bleeding edge and brand new, we can go back in time and they've been talked about or thought about, and maybe in a little bit different way. So once artificial intelligence has the totality of information that we have recorded and it's able to draw from it, I think there's going to be some very big concerns about the ethical use of that, because the ability to manipulate human behavior by showing uh, images that it will know, that we all know will elicit a certain response, by saying things that will elicit a certain response, by producing environments that will guide a civilization towards an inevitable outcome, is going to be uh, a very big concern. And I think that we've spent a long time being conditioned to accept information in very short, digestible bites, because there's only so much that we're able to really hold in our head at one time, which is why social media keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And TikTok, you just get 10 seconds out there and he's got someone's attention, that dopamine hit, and it goes off. I think that there's going to be a resurgence. There's going to need to be a resurgence of some of the very old school ways of thinking, of ethics and philosophy, and how we conduct ourselves as people in order to be able to utilize artificial intelligence in a way that's not going to be destructive for us. And so
Yeah, I agree.
I see that as being sort of a resurgence in just deep analytical thinking, where people used to have no screens and minimal distractions, and they'd sit down and think about things.
Well, they were shaped by their culture. They were shaped in the tavern. They were shaped leaning against a rickety old fence, looking at the pig trough with their neighbor. That's how they were shaped.
Mm,
Ethically and morally, culturally, guiding principles, all of these things, they were shaped leaning against a wall hundreds of years ago, in absence of all kinds of influences. The influence that you got was the man in front of you. But that isn't the case anymore. You don't know your neighbor. You don't know the pig farmer. You don't know the guy across the street. You don't know most of the people that are around you. The people that you do know are the people that you've self-selected in this place called the interwebs.
mm.
And a lot of people are being shaped by people that they think they know, and maybe they do know them as digital entities, but a lot of guiding principles, a lot of directional thought is now being formed by people that may or may not exist, to be honest.
Yeah.
And particularly if it's not live like this, where you can look someone in the eye that you've done a handshake with, or that through many live chats, and you realize they're not a digital avatar digitally talking to you. So a lot of the shaping of our thought processes just a few hundred years ago were done organically, literally. But now it's being done digitally, and it's being done in ways that we are choosing ourselves, like this, where we can see the person. But it's also being done in ways that, though we're choosing it, we're not sure of the content. And I'm speaking specifically about, chat bots, literally.
Mm,
Chat GPT or GPT 4.0, 3.5, whatever. You will never know if you're talking to a robot moving forward. You already don't know. I don't know.
mhm.
We're laymen. We can't recognize the signs and symptoms now of a bot that's intelligent when it's talking to us. So we're back in the day, we were formed organically. Today, we're being formed digitally. And so what to do with that? Well, it's a really important moment in history, that if you haven't paid attention to where your influences are coming from till now, moving forward, you should start paying attention to where your influences are coming from, because literally we're kind of shaping humanity in real time right now as kind of a massive experiment that not too many people are talking about. And it's called this: us working alongside of the robots. Now, they're either going to work with us or against us, but we get to decide. And no one's doing much deciding right now because not too many people are talking about it. So I think the first thing I would say to anyone who's listening to this is, take a moment after this podcast to just do a little bit of research into GPT 4.0. Just spend an hour of your life learning a little bit more about what is almost at our front doorstep. And if you learn a little bit about 4.0 and shake your head and think, wow, I didn't know that was going to be a thing. It's already a thing. So be more concerned about what 5.0 is going to look like, because 4.0 is going to change our world significantly. Imagine what 5.0 is going to do, and 6.0, and so on and so forth. So, as I've said to my sons just recently, with Evan being first year engineering as an example, the form of engineer that he's going to be is entirely different than the form of engineer that my wife is right now. And so I said to him, hey, look, when you're interacting with GPT 4.0, your engineering will kind of be a conversation with a robot where you're guiding the robot. I call it the robot. Of course, it's much more than that. But for simple terms, the robot will do what you want it to do. It's your job to learn how to talk to the robot. And you don't know how to talk to anything until you understand how to talk to people, how to talk to yourself, how to talk to with technology, and then how to talk with all of those three things combined with an eye towards humanity. So, these things are going to be so powerful. The changes that they can make for society as a whole are going to be so massive. In the wrong hands, it will be a problem. So, how to manage that? I mean, Elon Musk talked about it a little bit, how he wanted to decentralize the ability of AI or the singularity or whatever you want to call it, GPT 4.0. He wanted to decentralize by using a brain implant to some degree, Neuralink. And his idea was, I think it's valid. In fact, I was kind of looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to when it deploys. Eventually, it's inevitable. We will have to become more interactive with again, I'll call it the singularity, or with the variety, the flavor of the year, GPT 4.0, 5.0, 6.0, whatever the case is. There will come a time where it will get decentralized. And whether it is a little contact lens that you put in one eye that has, we'll call it Wi-Fi 7.2 or whatever, you will be connecting with a technology, we'll call it a mesh, a web mesh. You'll be connecting with it and interacting with it and gaining from it, because if there's no gain for you, then you're not going to do it, unless maybe it's keeping up with the Joneses because the neighbors are doing rad things and you want to do rad things. It's going to happen. Listen, you can fight it all you want. There'll be some holdouts. There'll be whatever, 1% of the planet, 10% of the planet, doesn't matter what it is, pick a random number. There will be holdouts that won't engage in the technology for whatever reason, but the majority of the species will engage with the ability, and our future will become radically different every 2 to 3 years, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Remember what it was like when we used to go to the bar or wherever prior to the internet and having it in the palm of your hand, and you'd have a discussion with somebody and a point of argument might come up, and you sit down and try and figure out a solution to that argument. Something simple, who won the Super Bowl at this date, or whatever it might be, and you'd speculate back and forth, and you'd think about different ways how you might be right or how the other person might be right, and then we get these devices, and all you do, barroom conversation comes up. Oh, here's the answer. Click, there it is. And that's the end of conversation. And I think people have become conditioned to that The difficult part is that end of conversation is what is recorded in the internet on this. And for something like who won the Super Bowl, perhaps there's an absolute answer to that, but there's so many things that don't have that absolute answer. And when you talk about us being formed by leaning on the fence and fitting in societally with our neighbors and finding that kind of mesh, the futurists would say that the emphasis on fitting in is going to be less and less, and the emphasis on individuality is going to be more in order to work with AI. But then to bring this kind of around a little bit, when you talk about holdouts, Industrial Revolution, I've read about protests and riots because people are saying, these machines aren't taking my job, they can't do what I can do, and people fighting against us or against that. And the same will happen. There's going to be people who will say, I can't believe it. I've worked my whole life. I worked in a certain sphere. I've accumulated all of this time, information in order to do this task, and it's just going to be made obsolete in a second by AI. I'm going to try and fight this. I do see a swing in that pendulum. We look at our current woke culture, and one person has put it, and they said, the biggest negative of the many with the woke culture is that it's trained the individual to believe they have no agency, that they can't affect what it is that's around them. And I think if people can start realizing that there will be changes, they need to be adaptable to those changes, and they can affect the direction that change takes for them. They have that agency more than sitting in and doing a protest or throwing soup on a painting or whatever it might be. Things just like this, just a couple of lunch boxes sitting around in front of a camera talking about these ideas and how we can shape that forward for ourselves, selfishly, personally, in a way that's going to be positive for everybody else. Because then we get to live in that.
Well, if you don't mind, your example of the football game, I don't watch football, but
Me
as
neither.
you were describing that, here's what I did in my head, because this is how I think, this is how I like to live life. Someone says, hey, who won the Super Bowl? Of course, I'm not going to have an answer for that because I don't know. I can't name 3 teams.
Sure.
But whoever it is, first things first, someone or everyone pulls out their phones and does this. Deep, doop, 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 doop. Oh, it was the San Francisco whoever's. And they won. And then everyone nods their head and says, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was a good game. But here's what my head does. When someone says, who won the Super Bowl in whatever year? I think, what do you mean by winning?
That's
In
right.
what context? How are you framing that? You mean, what was the outcome of the game? Or where were the real winning moments? Or who won leading up to the game because they had to do ... and they learned this, and this, and they evolved that, and that. And because of this, we now have a sharper knife and fork and spoon or whatever. Like, what is winning? Because this is how my brain works. This is when I'm sitting at we'll call it a table in a saloon with a bunch of buddies, and that question comes up. I don't care who won. I don't even know who played. What I want to do is talk about 47 levels deeper. And so what we've become is, it's like the internet is our host and we're all digital parasites. And I use the term parasitic for a specific reason, because generally speaking, on a parasitic relationship, it's take and not give. And so we just take from the internet. Who won the game? Who won that game? What's the temperature tomorrow? Blah, 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 whatever. Take. But there isn't much give. And so, therefore, I call it a parasitic relationship with a digital host. So the best way to operate within that kind of an environment, a environment where you need something, but you need to keep the host healthy, is you learn to interact with it so that the host doesn't die because you've sucked all of the blood out of it as a parasite. And which is an extreme example, but it makes my point in the sense that as a parasite, if you're just taking and not giving, you're not shaping your future. You're surviving until your future dies.
Well, A true parasitic relationship is one where the parasite thrives within the body that it's taking from, because if
Sure.
it kills the body, it dies. And so it has to find that way where it can take just enough, provide enough, and work together with it.
Well, that's
Um,
symbiosis, though.
Yes, that's
That's
right.
not
So that's what I
parasitic.
was so
Right.
parasitic, it's going to do what it's going to do. And maybe the parasite's smart enough to not suck too much blood out so that the host dies real quick. But inevitably, as a parasite, you're taking and not giving, but symbiotically
Mhm.
operating. Now that's a whole different thing. And that's kind of what I'm using as the example of how to do a better internet, how to do a better life, how to do a better simulation is find a way to not just draw down from the digital host, find a way to interact with it or interoperate with it or take and give. And so if everyone's sitting at that saloon table and poking in for the answer on who won the Super Bowl, we're doomed, man. If that's all you're using, if that's all you're doing, if that's your gig, if you're like a 1 millimeter deep thinker, we're doomed, baby. So we all just need to think a little bit deeper. And it used to happen with the pig farmer
Mhm.
and his neighbor leaning against the fence. Someone would say, the pig farmer perhaps would say, "Hey, do you know who won the Super Bowl?" And the other guy who's leaning against the shovel or whatever would say, "I don't know what a Super Bowl is, but what are your thoughts on the crop this year?" And the pig farmer ain't going to pull out his interwebs device and get the answer. He's going to say, "I don't know, Bob. I've been a little concerned because of the this, that, and the other thing. And several years ago, blah, blah, blah. And Betty down the street who's baking sourdough bread, she thought duh, duh, duh. And what ideas and future definitive moments for our species weren't formed in absence of all of mankind. They were formed with a pig farmer who didn't have to be a rocket scientist, didn't have to be called Elon Musk. He was just a dude who paid attention to his surroundings, thought about things deeply because he wasn't distracted. His entire day was thinking about how to do it better for the pigs in his cornfield. And in those, we'll call them moments of silence, where his only considerations were his life, his family, his community, there's way more deeper thought there as you're toiling the land than there is if you're speeding down the highway in your Tesla with the tunes blasting, talking to your executive assistant about how you're going to go raid another company to make another $100 million and laugh about it all the way to your Starbucks meeting. That isn't that isn't that's not working with our species. That's working with the digital host to parasitically draw down your own selfish intentions. And so I know there's philosophy blended into this. I know there's, big subjects that we're talking about. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a simple yes or no, one or zero, kind of a binary question. And that's, do you want to do good or do you want to be a dick?
Binary. So that leads into, holy crap. So AI, quantum computing, and things actually existing in superposition of each other, because you can actually have positive, negative, yes and no at the same time, which is maybe we just leave that down a little bit of the way.
Schrodinger, we'll leave that one.
Right, exactly. But quantum computing is here, and it is coming in a bigger way, and it's going to leverage AI. The reason that I thought AI would be an interesting chat from the collective standpoint is because I have been seeing for the last number of years a real desire in the younger generation, the people that I will associate with that are younger than myself, a huge desire for human connection, because they're living in this world of social media and constant connectedness, and they're feeling so extremely disconnected from each other. And that is one of the areas where I see endeavors such as the collective is playing a massive value for people. It provides a level of regularity where people can tune in and they can see similar people uh, tackling concepts that are hopefully going to be meaningful to them, and they're invited to participate, and they're invited to ask questions or be on the collective or work in some way with it. So that was the one thing about the whole AI form that I thought the collective kind of is working with, because as AI grows, there's going to be a need for individuality, but there's also going to need that human connection and knowing how other people are operating within that sphere and at all different levels and all different backgrounds. And Chance, you and I were talking a little bit about this prior to recording, about people who are starting podcasts and people who are uh, starting businesses, and the benefits selfishly to themselves, which also truly benefit everybody else around them. Like, for example, if a Navy SEAL starts their own podcast, a couple of good benefits out of that for that individual would be they get to share their life experience with others. They get to monetize that so they can grow that a little bit larger and in turn share it with more and more. But it also normalizes the experiences that they've gone through from a mental health standpoint and builds a community of people where all of a sudden they're not feeling like they're isolated in what they're feeling and what they're doing. And that's one of the areas where I see the collective providing huge value as we move forward into this AI experience.
It's a great point, and it leads back into what Shaun was saying. And the reason I put up this progress or competitions panel was the fact that this is kind of what we're talking about. And if the pig farmer is by himself, leaning against the fence, just working his farm, and he's got no one else to talk to, it's very easy to just stare at the mud and be like, wow, this is bad, or this season is good, or my pigs are fat. And you don't have to actually expand your thought process outside of what is right in front of you. And I think it goes into kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the idea that like you can hit a plateau on any one of those needs, right? You can just survive with food and shelter and safety, and you can just you can survive there. But it takes a thought process of you have to have an introduction into that next stage. And it's, you guys are talking about the Industrial Revolution and all these things. I was thinking the printing press, how massive of a technological leap that was. But if it wasn't for the fact that the printing press allowed people to read, literacy would never have increased, because why would there be a need for it? And so you have skill sets being developed by the vastness of humanity because the technology is there. And I think with AI and with the new chatbots and all these things that are coming out, we can look at it in two ways. We can look at it as a competition for our jobs, right? They're coming to take our jobs. Or we can look at it as a progress, as, okay, this will make this particular job easy, which will free me up to do more. It'll free us up to then collectively develop, collectively push forward. But again, as both of you guys are saying, it takes the introduction of that concept in order for that one single individual to go, oh, I can think higher, right? If we're sitting at the bar and we're debating who won what trophy at what point in time in whichever sport, we can do that all day. And I mean, we've seen people spend their entire lives going to the pub every day, talking about the same things to the same people over and over and over and over again. But it takes one person to step down and go, hold on a second. So yeah, who won? But who had the better record ahead of time? Where were the turning points in the game, as Shaun was saying? Like, in order to think deeper, you have to have an introduction. I can't say have to, but it makes it more streamlined.
I've been doing it for a while. In fact, I used the term with you some time ago when I said it's my intention to quantumly entangle a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember me saying that a long time ago? Yeah.
Yep.
So that's my intention. So let's use machine language. What does quantumly entangling a bunch of my friends together mean? It means this. how do you learn how to think deeper? By me talking deeper.
Mm-hmm.
How do you learn how to read? You observe someone else picking up a book and doing some reading.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've never read before in the morning, but you've been tracking anything that I do, chances are you started reading recently. Maybe not every single morning, but more than you used to, because you're watching me do it on the regular. And if you're into anything that I do, or you're just trying to figure out who this weird old dude is, or you're just trying to figure out how to try something new, and you're tuning into what I do, what's new is that I read regularly, and you see me doing it. And if you try it, guess what I just did? I quantumly entangled a seed into your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that you read now in the morning before you have your coffee, a la Huberman protocol, you wake up in the morning, you go over, you get your sunshine, you get your vitamin D in the Mark 1 eyeball. Over a period of time, you do some reading. Of course, you're going to wait 60 to 90 minutes for the adenosine to clear out of your system in order to have your first coffee, a la Huberman protocol. And so if you've seen anything that I've talked about or do, you already know these things. You get to choose whether you want to do them or not that day, but you already know them because I've already quantum entangled that into your peanut. It's not that I'm not like running any weird program on anyone. I'm doing me. And if you're paying attention, now you're doing me as well to some degree. And maybe that's only 0.0001%. Maybe it's higher. But whatever it is, we're now quantumly entangled. And here's how. If I have a drone, I fly my drone, I say, drones are cool. You should try drones because they'll get you outside in nature and et cetera, et cetera. I've seen, in fact, I was looking at some drone footage from a guy yesterday and I thought, oh, that's awesome that he got that drone. I love that because I've now seen people get into drones because of me chirping about drones and trying to put that word out on the street of the positives of that kind of a thing. And now they're flying drones. And I can tell you what, every time they hit power up on that drone, I'm in their head. And it might only be for a fleeting split second of, oh, I'm so glad that Shaun ... or I wish Shaun just wouldn't have ... whatever. I'm in their head. I'm quantumly entangled in that moment for sure. From the moment they thought, I wonder if drones are cool. That's it. We're now quantumly entangled. And I'll be dead and gone. And that individual will still be flying that drone. And we're still entangled, baby. Because the initiation of that thought process, the initiation of the execution against that outcome, I'm now layered in on that outcome. Maybe only in a tiny way, but we are now entangled. And so I decided some time ago that if I was going to quantumly entangle, I can't do it with everyone and I can't do it constantly. So I've got to pick and choose, and I choose to pick cool people to entangle with. And so that's what I've decided to do. And so it's not like there's a strategy or a process or anything. It's an organic thing that I'm still trying to learn how to do over many years, many years. But I honestly, I do believe in quantum entanglement within the machine language world and within the, I don't know, metaphysical world that on an energetic level that operates all around us, depending on how quantum you want to get, on how energy related sort of philosophical, is this a simulation sort of discussion. Depends on how deep you want to go, baby. But if you want to keep it at high level or a very simple level, only one level deep, machine language quantum entanglement is a term out there within the data world, but I also believe it's something within the organic world.
So
Makes a lot of sense. Trev?
yeah, quantum entanglement insofar as one electron that's quantumly entangled with another electron and a change in the rotation of one, no matter how far away the other one being, will affect a change in that rotation. It's one way of quantum entanglement that that I've experienced. In the same way, this comes down to leadership. Leadership, the art of influencing human behavior to accomplish a mission in the manner so desired by the leader. If we're to exhibit thoughtful leadership practices in our own life and watch how that impacts those around us, we're practicing that quantum entanglement and we're affecting that spin, that electron spin, in a direction that's going to be beneficial for everyone. And if we're to subscribe to that quantum entanglement theory, I would think the inverse of that would also be true, that we are the sum of what we're consuming. So if we're going to be hanging around those who bring us down, reading literature that's negative. I got a friend, Greek fellow, Barry. I asked him one time, well, have you seen this movie? He said, nope, I don't watch that movie. I don't watch any movie that's has any violence against women or children. I said, it's just a movie. He's like, I don't want to accept that into my life. The more that I accept these sort of things into my life, the more that it can kind of become me. And I thought, it's a very interesting way of looking at that. Whereas I would say there's a complete distinction between one and the other. He's looking at it from the standpoint of, I am the sum of what I consume. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Again, a throwback to the collective, trying to ensure that we keep each other on the same path of straight and narrow, and we're acting as leaders in our thought, our word, and our actions, and we're making sure that we surround ourselves with others with similar goals and aspirations so that we too are quantumly entangled in a positive way.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine, just the other day, actually 2 days ago, I won't say his name, but he's a very good friend of mine, and he's in another country. And he said to me, "Hey, pal, have you seen that movie yet? And I've forgotten the title of it. It's a couple of old guys, great actors. One is Colin Farrell, and it's filmed over in Ireland. Ishin. I'm not gonna look it up. I'm not gonna cheat.
Someone in the comments will.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not going to rely on my robotic overlord. So anyway, he'd been saying, you got to watch it. You got to watch it. He's get best actor of the year, blah blah blah, whatever. I thought, and I do like him as an actor. I thought, okay, I'm gonna jump on that. I mean, it's old school Ireland. It should be right up my alley. And I was about 10 minutes into it, and I was getting a vibe from it, man. I was getting a feeling. And I gave it another minute or two, and I was like, I don't like the way this movie feels. I don't like the direction that it's going per se, but I could fight through that sort of, I don't like the direction. I kind of see where it's going. It's not really my thing, but I'm going to commit because my friend says it's really good and everyone's saying it's really good, and I should probably watch it because I'll probably learn something from it. But as my prefrontal cortex is doing all of that stuff, my gut, my instinct, my vibe, my feels was saying, Shaun, I don't like this. I don't like the feel of this. So I stopped it. I didn't even make it 15 minutes into the movie. And the next day he said, hey, what'd you think of that movie? And I said, bro, I only did 15 minutes of it. He's like, what? I loved it. And I said, hey, I'm just going to say, dude, it was giving me the vibes. I was getting the feels from it that I didn't like, and I don't know what it was. I didn't give a whole pile of thought as to why I was feeling what I was feeling, because I didn't need to, because I had a feeling, and I'm not going to engage in that just to fight or wade through yet another Hollywood movie that may or may not make me smarter or better or wiser or whatever. But I'll tell you what it will do is make me feel not great. And so I lasted 15 minutes and I killed it, and I won't go back and watch it until I feel like maybe I want to watch it. But right now, I don't ever see me watching that movie again because it gave me the vibe. And so what I take on is who I become, and what I am is what I put out, and what I want to put out is nothing but good. And so how can I do that if I'm vibing on really negative stuff for me, and that's now part of me, and I don't want to get all hippie or crystal balls or anything like that. I'm just saying, man, like we are what we are based on what we do and what we expose ourselves to, that we're a sum of all the people around us, all of the experiences that we've had, and our intention. So let's pretend for a moment I got a vibe from a movie. I now get to decide, do I want to commit into that right now, always, without much thought, every single moment that it pops up? Or do I conserve and hold my space for times where it's really important, like when I have to really commit to something that I absolutely don't want to commit to, that is life and death, like kicking in a door or whatever the case is. Those times are times when you don't have the luxury of deciding the negativity that you're going to be stepping into. There's times when you just have to step in, no ifs, ands, or buts. It's going to get done. And that's a matter of prioritization against what is in front of you, of course. But in the moment, down in the home theater with a movie that I can change with a click of a button, and there's no negative outcome for anyone, it's not life or death, it's not a high priority. If I've got the luxury of deciding go, no go, I'll save all of my life energy for moments where it's critical. I'm not going to burn down my life force, my energy, we'll call it, based on not giving any thought to the moment where I am going to burn it down. I'll always consider how I'm going to use my life moving forward in a positive manner.
Yeah. That's some awesome thoughts, you guys. We've run through 55 minutes already, and it's
Oh man, I got so much more on this.
we could talk like for days on this one, but I do have one particular question here that I just wanted to posit to you guys from the audience, and it is: if we're living in a simulation, does that make Shaun Neo?
The one, Neo.
Listen, I've thought about this a lot.
I think you're more Morpheus than a Neo, but
Oh, I've thought about it so much, and I love the Matrix movies, and I love the what they represent in the sense of deeper thought and the philosophy of it, and I mean, honestly, I think we're all our own Neos. I really do believe that, and so it's so what does that even mean? I mean, you got to think a lot about it, but on a very surface level, it's our universe, man. I've said this to people even recently this week, bro. It's for you to decide how you want to run your game. If you want to leave right now, if you want to step away from that microphone and disappear and we never see you again, okay. It's your universe. You get to decide how you run your program. You want to interact with this slice of the universe or this frequency or this energetic pattern or whatever. You decide or you move along. But just understand that it's your universe to run how you want to run. And every single second, every real time moment is a moment that you get to decide your path, your intention, what you want out of this simulation. And so, not to get too deep into it, but some time ago, I decided that if I'm going to be Neo in my own universe, I'm going to run a good program, man. I'm not going to run a bad program. So, I'm not going to be Mr. Anderson. I'm going to be freaking Neo by choice. And it doesn't mean that I can stop bullets. It just means that I can control my space around me. I can control my universe in ways that people don't understand because they've never tried.
yeah.
So you've decided to speak like Mr. Anderson, but not be Mr. Anderson.
yeah, probably.
True.
That whole Matrix thing, interesting. I really like where you went with that, Shaun, because I truly believe everyone is their own Neo, their own maker of their destiny. In the same way that if we look at it, okay, if we're stuck in a Matrix, and that was a kind of a groundbreaking movie at the time, it got people thinking in a different way. But when we started talking about this at the beginning, I said, there really isn't much unique thought. And I would challenge somebody to convince me otherwise. I mean, you look at the Matrix and the idea that you're living in a simulation. Well, I mean, Descartes posited this and is like, how do I know I actually exist? And he came up with that cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. And that was groundbreaking until someone called him out and says, hold on a second. Wasn't it St. Augustine who said, I have knowledge, therefore I have knowledge of my existence? But St. Augustine was building upon like Aristotle's work, who built upon Plato. And Plato says, knowledge is knowledge of existence. I have knowledge, so I know I exist. But they're thinking about something in a more deep way, and I think they're all of them, even the Wachowski brothers, when they put forward the Matrix, are looking at an age-old idea of, are we in control of our destiny, or is something else in control of our destiny? And I think for most people, something else is in control of their destiny until they reach that point where they start questioning their own existence and whether they are in the matrix, and they start putting into practice different tools to see if they can actually affect their own outcome. And each and every person that I know who's put those tools into place has seen that they have now created their own reality around them. So I agree with you 1,000% on that, Shaun. We all are our own makers of our destiny.
There's two powerful forces at play within you. There's the ability to influence your immediate surroundings, your existence as you stand wherever you're standing or sitting or driving right now. Listen to this. You get to shape that existence that's all around you right now, while simultaneously you get to impact the entire species, just like St. Augustine did when they quantum entangled that thought into your mind. I mean, there's no way that you could say what you said, Trav, unless that had been quantumly entangled into you
You got it.
many, many years ago. And so does that individual still exist throughout eternity? Sure does.
Mm-hmm.
St. Augustine will last forever based on having a moment of lucidity where they came up with a simple sentence, we'll call it, that crystallized the moment in a eternal truth that has impacted mankind over many, many years to think deeper on a single statement. And so I guess my point would be that the power within us is to shape our universe in our immediate sense while shaping the simulation all around us.
Yeah.
There's some amazing stuff going on here, boys. We got some great thoughts, some really excellent conversation. I have, like I said, we could take this for days. So first off, Travis, are you available tomorrow? Because we can carry on this conversation tomorrow, and we can, because I have questions here that I'd love to get to, but we're already over an hour.
Okay.
If you're up for it, we could do another one tomorrow, and we will carry on this conversation.
I
How do you feel?
will see if I can make myself available for tomorrow.
Excellent.
And if it isn't tomorrow, buddy, don't
we-
worry, because
yeah.
time is just a construct.
Yeah,
And
you
we're all
got
just
it.
quantumly entangling, so it's
You
all
got
good.
it.
Because tomorrow technically never comes, so we will see. I do really, first off, Travis, thank you so much for the conversation. This has been awesome. I sat in the background for this whole thing, just like stunned. So this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for joining us again. This is, I can't say it enough. Any final thoughts before we close her for the day?
Well, I'd have to say that we should remind people to like, share, subscribe, because apparently, from a marketing perspective, that's a very important thing to do.
Quantumly entangling.
There you go.
Got it. And, in that whole thing that we're talking about, Aristotle and the rest, there's also the Eastern philosopher Cheng Zhao, I think is how you pronounce it, but he famously had the dream that he was a butterfly. And it was so real, and he floated around from plant to plant and through the wind, and then he woke up and he realized, I'm not a butterfly, I'm a human being, because this feels real. Then he put the question forward and said, am I a human dreaming I was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming I was a human? So I guess I would leave people with, what do you want to make your reality?
What do you want to make your reality? That's a great question.
That's great.
Any final thoughts, Shaun?
Yeah, but I'm not going to give them because I could literally talk for an hour just on that. But I love it. So yeah, love it, buddy. That's legit.
Yeah.
So I'll end with this. Thanks for bringing the heat, Trav, and it's a great topic. It's a great conversation. It's so, I mean, for anyone who's listening to this right now, if you're kind of sitting back, scratching your head, thinking like, "Oh no," don't think, "Oh no." Think, "Oh yeah."
Yes.
Oh yeah. And that's all I'm gonna say. Just don't take this the wrong way, take it the right way, and the right way is yes. But you've just got to do a little bit of reading. You've just got to do a little bit more deep thinking on this subject. And then you'll understand why you should be pumping your fist and thinking, yes. But you've got to understand how to play the game. And before you can play the game, you've got to learn the game. So just do a little bit of reading is all.
Yes, absolutely. Read, learn, build, grow with us here on The Collective. We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.